The discovery of LSD was a godsend for the army which, on the threshold of the nuclear era, was looking for a weapon that could defeat an enemy without firing a single shot. The man who headed this program longest was James Ketchum, shown here in uniform. He was a psychiatrist who was working for the military. As a patriot, he was prepared to push the boundaries in his research. He tested around 30 drugs, but focused specially on LSD and the dangerous benzylate. He treated 7,000 soldiers, hundreds of whom later sued the army because of the side effects that they still experience and attribute to these drugs. However, when questioned, James Ketchum sees things differently.
I think they were very patriotic. They've not been given credit. They've been called innocent guinea pigs, which they certainly were not. They knew what they were doing, and we told them as much as we could about it. We had to limit the names of the drugs because some of them were artificially made, and if we were to give out the name, of course, that would also reveal the structure, and that we were afraid the Russians would get that. They were apparently following our work. We thought they were ahead of us, but actually they weren't, and so they were watching what we did to see what they could learn and use, and they developed a similar drug later themselves.
James Ketchum doesn't like these kinds of videos, as he believes they create confusion. He claims the products were more festive than dangerous, and prefers images like this one of a soldier on LSD. He also highlights this video of volunteers who received minimal doses of LSD. A few minutes later, they were incapable of responding to simple orders and doing basic exercises. In parallel with the army, the CIA was also developing its own programs, codenamed Bluebird, Artichoke, and later MK Ultra. But in order to implement these programs on a large scale, they needed funds. And in 1950, the Korean War gave them the perfect pretext. Some American soldiers were captured. During their detention, pilots admitted to having dropped chemical weapons onto Korea, which was forbidden. The Americans claimed that this was due to psychological manipulation, and that the CIA took advantage of this godsend to secure budgets that allowed them to keep on working on brainwashing.
During the Korean War, the American pilots who were captured started making apparently false confessions of germ warfare. So the first question is, was it really false confessions? But then when they were brought back to the United States, the military and the military psychiatrists studied them and decided that there was mind control operations being run against Americans. So for defensive purposes, we had to study this, figure it out, therefore we created MK Ultra. And before MK Ultra was Bluebird and Artichoke. So the whole rationale is it's defensive. It's because of what the communists are doing. Problem is, the Korean War started in June 1950, and Bluebird was signed into operation by the head of the CIA in April 1950.
The race is on, and there are no limits. Devastating drugs are given to animals, but it's mainly the human subjects who interest the scientists. At the Edgewood camp where James Ketchum worked, soldiers are called upon more and more frequently. They think they are testing gas masks, but in reality, the canisters are filled with a toxic chemical.
They were testing a whole assortment of different hallucinogens like LSD and marijuana and things like that. And they explored other drugs, very high levels of atropine, scopolamine, benzolates, very powerful. And a lot of these soldiers ended up incapacitated. It took them a long time to recover. And while they're in recovery, the doctors cannot do any more experiments because it's basically a very small base and testing operation. In other words, they needed a new site.
It is in this context of the Cold War and spy games that on the 16th of August 1951, the tragedy at Pont Saint-Esprit unfolded. France was suffering economically, and the Americans distrusted this ally that they couldn't control. The village was under the control of the socialists at the time. In the eyes of the United States, they were the Reds, the epitome of the Soviet threat. But the mayor, Roger Castillon, doesn't believe in a foreign conspiracy.
Ce que j'ai du mal à imaginer, c'est pourquoi Pont Saint-Esprit serait devenu le terreau expérimental de la CIA. Voilà, quoi. Quelqu'un qui fait quelque chose, il le fait pour une raison, quoi. Donc c'est ça que je ne perçois pas bien. Donc je vois pas bien pourquoi la CIA serait derrière cet événement-là.
But American experts, like Colin Ross, are much more down to earth.
Obviously, that compound didn't just come in the rain, or just wasn't sitting around naturally. It was obviously organized, controlled, distributed. So whether it was actually LSD or some other compound, well, doesn't make that much difference. Pont Saint-Esprit is actually not just this happened once in the world in a village in France. It's consistent with all the other experiments on the public that have done in the United States and done for a documented fact.
To achieve their goals, would the Americans be prepared to use a whole village as a laboratory? After all, these were civilians and not trained soldiers. However, in September 1950, nearly 1 year before Pont Saint-Esprit, this is exactly what they did, and in their own country. Off the coast of San Francisco, American Marines were carrying out military exercises. A ship approached the coast and bombarded the city with Serratia marcescens. The military were testing the effects of spraying it through the air. This classified secret defense map shows the scale of the targeted area. At least 11 people were hospitalized, one of whom died of pneumonia. These are proven facts. The official documents on this have been declassified. But at Pont Saint-Esprit, the population remains skeptical. After so many different theories, a plot by the Americans seems just as fanciful.
Alors là, hein, là je crois personne, là. Hein, non, non. Alors, il ne serait pas venu avec un dé à coudre à Pont Saint-Esprit à mettre un poison ici. Et ça nous aurait foutu la France entière, les Américains, alors. Hein? À t'en faire. Moi, à mon humble avis, c'est une blague encore inadmissible. Parce qu'on fait quelque chose bien ou on ne le fait pas, hein?
The villagers wonder why a supposedly festive drug that is adored by hippies would have had such terrifying effects at Pont Saint-Esprit. James Ketchum, the military psychiatrist who specialized in LSD, admits, a little reluctantly, that the drug is frightening for those who take it unknowingly.
Some individuals could have a bad trip if someone gave them LSD and didn't tell them about it. That's very anxiety producing. Or if they were inexperienced and not particularly well balanced themselves, took a fairly large dose of LSD, they could have a bad trip. How would you feel if you had a cup of coffee and started to see things going like this or like this, brilliant colors appear on the ceiling, or suddenly you felt you're out of your body and looking down on yourself. These are all things that can happen with LSD.
But could these effects have had a delayed onset? In Pont Saint-Esprit, the older generation remember the night of the apocalypse, where dozens of deranged people were committed to psychiatric wards because of terrifying visions. The night took place more than 2 weeks after the cursed bread was consumed. But once again, James Ketchum admits that it was possible.
Some individuals had flashbacks later in which they would go into a situation where they had been when they were taking LSD and have a flood of the same emotions and some of them anxiety-producing.
In 1951, French investigators also suspected LSD and called on Albert Hofmann, the inventor of the drug. On the spot, he told the investigators that he had no doubt that the hallucinations were due to LSD. But after returning to Switzerland, he backtracked, claiming that he was mistaken. The French authorities wanted an explanation, but public health documents from 1951 show that the expert suddenly became unreachable.
I would think if the Sandoz scientists are saying it doesn't seem to be LSD, they're just trying to cover up the fact that it's 100% for sure that LSD must have come from Sandoz, because they were the only suppliers. It's nothing more than a cover-up.
Following months of inquiries, the French investigators were so disoriented by the number of fruitless leads that the incident at Pont Saint-Esprit fell victim to its own mystery.